firearm. It will also, in some cases, require the batterer, the perpetrator, the respondent to pay child support and other monetary resources that will help the victim to begin on their journey of safety and free of violence. Okay, so this order of protection is available 24 hours in Davidson County. There are several advocacy centers available to help victims here in Nashville, since their show is domestic violence in Nashville. Yeah, so we have the Gene Crow Advocacy Center, which is located right at the courthouse, and they have advocates there on staff that will help victims to obtain orders of protection and go to court with victims. Under the leadership of Mayor Berry, we're going to see the building of an Office of Family Safety Center. And it's going to be on Murfreesboro Road. And it's going to be a one-stop shop where victims can go in to get advocacy help, counseling help, and to get an order of protection and to get a warrant, to obtain a warrant against the person who has hurt them. And there are going to be other wraparound services there at the Office of Family Safety. I do want to also share with your listening audience, if they need to talk to someone in 24 hours, they can call the YWCA hotline, which is 615-242-9911. So those are, or Morning Star as well, 615-860-0003. So these local agencies are available to provide victims with help 24 hours a day.
And so you think that Nashville is very, very progressive in terms of trying to deal with the issue of domestic violence. But now, I also understand that there are not enough domestic violence shelters in town to accommodate the individuals that might be trying to get away from the batterer and whatnot.
That's true, and that's when we had to step up as a community and help victims. So shelters depend on money from various resources, donations, state funding, and other types of individual contributions to their agencies to make shelters available. So you can definitely lobby your legislator to give more money to these funds to support shelters and to increase the beds for victims of domestic violence.
Pastor, close us out here.
You know, it's kind of puzzling, you know, because like I say, in my situation, when you don't know, you know, you don't have an idea. And then when you look at it now that, you know, my daughter has no voice in the situation, and now the perpetrator, he's trying to, you know, blame her.
Put all the blame on her.
Yeah, he's trying to blame her. And of course, there's nothing there present that, you know, to support anything that he's saying, you know, but to try to blame her, it's almost trying to say, well, you're responsible for your own death, but then when I'm hearing about the power and control and the fact that, you know, my daughter has this personality that if she didn't want to talk to you, she wouldn't talk, you know, and that's with anybody, you know what I'm saying? So, and in that situation, he came in and he tried to make her have a conversation with him where she hadn't been talking to him for a couple of days, that I found out from my wife. And he tried to make her talk to him, you know, this same thing he told me. And what I didn't know, I knew that when I picked him up, he had her car keys and her cell phone and stuff like that. But what I didn't know was that she was, until I heard his testimony, viewed his video testimony, that she was actually trying to leave. And he came out of the house, her house. She was going to leave him in her house as she left and get in her car and leave. And he came out in the yard and took her keys, physically took her keys from her, and then wouldn't give them back, and this how this whole thing began to escalate, you know. And then at the end of the day, my daughter's deceased, and now he's trying to wiggle his way out of it. And I'm thankful that, you know, the district attorney's office is, you know, is fighting this thing, you know, and I believe that, you know, we'll overcome in the situation. You know, and then you think about, you know, it's a lot of young women, you know, that will move these guys into their houses and stuff like that without really even knowing these people and who they are and stuff. And this guy, he seemed to be an okay guy, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, you know, it turned out, you know, differently. You know, now my daughter's 24-year-old daughter is deceased, you know, murdered by somebody that I thought was okay, my wife thought was okay, because like I say, there was never any sign.
Right. And batterers don't tend to wear a sign that say I'm a batterer on the back. The relationship always usually starts off good. Just like, and I go back to the Medea's family reunion example, it always starts off good. And we want to believe the best about people. And so he raises some really good points about how this batter is building up this situation. Batter is really act good in public often because when the victim finally reaches out and says, this person is hurting me, they're going to say, are you kidding me? He's always at the church. He's so nice. He helps the pastor. And you're going to tell me that you must be doing something wrong. So this is the kind of game the batterer plays. And the batterer always, most always does not want to take ownership for their behavior. So let me just take a moment to talk about batterers intervention programs. So if I commit domestic assault, I will go, most likely I'll be arrested, and I'm supposed to be arrested, immediately arrested, and I'm supposed to be held for 12 hours, okay? That's everywhere. That's here in Davidson County too.
40 seconds.
Oh. But there are batterers intervention classes that are assigned, and so batterers can learn to hold themselves accountable for their behaviors, so victims will not be blamed for something the perpetrator did.
Very good. And let me thank the two of you for bringing by that excellent information. And I know, Ms. Kimbro, that we were running out of time, and your enthusiasm for what you're doing, and I think that's very, very good, you see. Yes. And I think that this has been a very, very helpful show this morning. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.
Surely will.
I'll see you in 2 weeks, definitely.
Great.
At the NAACP meeting.
Appreciate y'all, brother.
Take care now.
Yeah, y'all be good now. Ball. Oh, Dr. Baldwin.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Waiting on you. You're the only thing that's keeping me here. If I'm trying to get through with you, I'm out of here. Oh, Miss Kimbro? Yeah, yeah, Well, it's good seeing you, Doctor. Very good. And we got a very, very important topic today.
Okay.
You want, let's put that book up? Yeah, yeah, put it up and so we can make some shots of it.
You want to take some shots?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's already been.
Huh? Just do it on, so we can get it on this show too.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just put it up there. You know, it won't hurt.
Oh, yes, sir. So how you doing?
Oh, I couldn't be better. This is the last show here. And
Last one for the day.
last one for the day. And
You want to hear one day a week?
yeah, let me give you this. This is that's the outline for this particular show. And here, these are the channels that it's seen on Saturdays and Sundays. You have to consult your local listings and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera for
Man,
that.
this is good.
Yeah, so that.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's great. All right. Thanks. All right.
This is a timely topic here, Doctor.
Okay, background, education.
Yeah, it's just basic, you know, kind of information.
I thought we might deal with three questions. One, what are the issues confronting blacks in this election?
Okay.
And to what extent are they being addressed by the two-party system? And secondly, where will black support go? Will blacks remain loyal to the Democratic Party? And then to deal with the general question at the end of the importance of this election.
Well, let me see this. See, I'll give this to you when I get through. This
Okay.
is I've got only copy I have here.
Okay.
And so you take this with you.
Okay.
But I just want to see what happened. Okay, African Americans in politics, background education, that's the first 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Then African Americans in politics, that's 8 minutes. You can talk about that. And then number 3, challenges of election of 2016 and Trump and African Americans. So,
Okay.
And I think that in a real sense that sort of captures.
That looks good.
That allows you to bring those 3 ideas in reference to what we're doing here. Yeah, this is they got this big debate tonight.
Oh man, yeah. Are you gonna watch
Oh
it?
yes, oh yes,
Okay.
oh yes. I wouldn't miss it for nothing in the world. I watched all 3.
I watched all of them also, including the vice president.
That's right. Yeah, I watch it all.
Yeah, man. How you
That's
think,
MSNBC and CNN. I mean, that's about the only channels that we watch at home.
how you think this thing gonna turn out?
Oh man, we got to win this thing.
Yeah, you think you can?
Yeah, I think we will. I think we will. This man is.
How could they put him in there? We in trouble.
You said that when we talked about this alt-right. See,
Yeah.
you know, you were right on. in reference to the alt-right movement.
Alt-right, man.
Did you see Rachel Maddox?
Oh, yes,
show
absolutely. I saw her characterization of the whole movement.
And so, yeah, the whole movement.
Yes,
that's right.
yeah, man.
I was glad to see that. I said, now, that's just
Right,
what Dr. Baldwin,
exactly. And, man, Steve Bannon and all these
all
guys, man.
yeah, the whole group there. The whole group. Everything that you said in reference to it, that she brought it all out and put it all together.
It's just a more respectable image of the Klan.
Neo-Nazis.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
They're nativistic. They are anti-immigration, anti-affirmative, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And they make up a large percentage of people.
Because
those are his followers. Those are the folks that follow him. But I don't think that, as everybody said, it's not enough to give him a victory.
I hope not.
And we really don't need him, Dr. Baldwin.
He'll
set everybody back up 100 years, man.
Yeah, but you know, this is a strange year. After Obama, 8 years of Obama, I think a lot of anger in the larger society. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And that might cause the kind of backlash that will.
I hope not.
I hope not either.
Yeah, we can't. No, we can't. Well, I tell you, you won't get that with my vote.
No, it depends on me.
That's one thing I know for sure. I don't know about everybody else.
Same here, Doc.
Yeah, we're just glad to have you.
Hang on to that.
Yeah, well, get it from me when I just wanted to make sure. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we had it. That I had the information. I got another, one of those. And I just wanted to give that to you.
Okay.
So that you could find all this information there, because. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is African Americans and the election of 2016. And we have with us to talk about the election of 2016 and the impact on African American citizens, Dr. Lewis Baldwin from Vanderbilt University formerly. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, you're retired now and doing great work, going all over the world, talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. And I think we've said time and time again that you are the greatest Martin Luther King scholar in this nation, primarily because of your scholarship in reference to doing it. And that's why we simply call upon you time and time again, because not only are you familiar with Martin Luther King, but also information that is contemporary with Dr. Martin Luther King. And I want to say publicly how we appreciate you and for the information that you're giving, and I know our audience feels the same way. But let's start off this African Americans and the election of 2016. Dr. Baldwin, having you make a few statements in reference to your background, education, and experiences.
Yeah.
And then we'll have that second segment and third segment to talk about the impact of the election of 2016 on African Americans, or vice versa.
That's right.
You see, and so let's do it from that perspective.
Yes, well, I'm a native of Camden, Alabama. I grew up in Wilcox County, Alabama, which is known as part of the Alabama Black Belt. I grew up there in the late 40s and the 50s and early 60s. Was exposed to much of what went on in terms of the civil rights movement in the Alabama Black Belt, and that instilled in me, I think, a deep interest in politics. As you well know, the civil rights movement was about not only the advancement of civil rights, but also about political rights, economic improvement in the black community, etc. So I was introduced very early to those kinds of values. Grew up in Camden, Alabama, attended the public schools in Camden, Alabama, graduated from Camden Academy High School in 1967. And in the fall of 1967, I matriculated at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama. And at that point, 1967 to 71, I not only majored in history and minored in political science, I was also involved in some of the demonstrations at Talladega College. So I graduated at Talladega in 1971 with a degree in history, went to Crozer Theological Seminary in Rochester, New York, was there for 3 years in the Master of Arts program, also received the Master of Divinity degree from Colgate Rochester Crozer Seminary, and from there to Northwestern University. In 1975, I graduated from Northwestern in 1980 with a PhD in the history of religion with a particular emphasis on Christianity. So that was the beginning of my interest in American politics, and particularly the impact of American political values and systems on the African American community.
Very good. And so, Dr. Baldwin, listening to you, I can see the same trail that I took in terms of making it. And I, as a matter of fact, you graduated, you became a professor at Vanderbilt University. And I think that I was one of the first African-American students to attend Vanderbilt University after I finished my degree. And so I knew you quite well, and of course I knew all of the folks that you know from Vanderbilt University, from Kelly Miller Smith, et cetera, et cetera. And so I can say that you've made a tremendous contribution, but you also helped the university and the Divinity School make an even greater contribution in terms of the African American experience. And I simply wanted to say that so that people will know that in a real sense you've made a tremendous contribution. Now you brought with you today a book, Dr. Baldwin, and let's talk about that book.
Yes, that book, of course, is part of my effort to contribute to the continuation of the struggle through my scholarship. Dr. King always said, Martin Luther King Jr. always said, that education is a major component of the civil rights program. So I took that seriously, and in the course of my 30 to 35 years of teaching, I published a lot of books on Dr. King, and the book that you have in mind now, Behind the Public Veil, The Humanness of Dr. King, is an attempt to humanize a major figure in the civil rights movement.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, we're going to get ready for our first commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll have about 8 minutes for the second segment, and we'll allow you to continue. We'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Well, you know, we've been sitting there for 35 years.
Yeah.
You know,
You were a student of August Meyer.
August Meyer, that's right. That's right. And
That's
as a matter
a
of
lot.
fact, I got to Vanderbilt because of August Meyer.
Did you?
He was over at Fisk teaching. And
He's no longer alive.
no, he and
Elliot Rudrick. Yeah.
He was over at Fisk, and they wouldn't allow him to come over to Vanderbilt and use the library. Oh, yes. And so when he left Fisk, he went to Kent State, and that's where I met him at, and I became one of his students.
Okay.
And after working a while, he said, you know where I want to send you? I want to send you back to Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
I want you to go to Vanderbilt University. And I had a big old afro.
Isn't that something?
That's how I got
But you were there with Darlene Clark.
Darlene Clark and Bill, let's see, Darlene Clark. It's about 6 or 7 of us there.
Okay.
I was there.
She's at Northwestern, I think, now.
Is she still working? Has she retired yet?
I'm not sure, but I know she was at Northwestern. She was at Michigan State.
Then
at Northwestern.
Yeah, we were there together. We were both August Meyer students. We really had a good time in terms of studying under Dr. August Meyer, and he was a Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Lewis Baldwin, and he's talking about African Americans and the election of 2016. Dr. Baldwin, let's see if we can continue this second segment by talking about some of the issues in this election that might have an impact upon African Americans and some of the consequences.
I think that's very important. I would say that the issues confronting Black Americans in this election, of course, are the same issues confronting all Americans to some extent. We're very interested in education, very interested in jobs, in a living wage, you know, and also issues that have to do with child care, that kind of thing. But when you look at the Black community, you're also taking into account more specific concerns, such as the relationship of the African American community to law enforcement. We know the epidemic of police shootings over the last decade. So Black Americans have a specific concerns about how we might improve relations between the Black community and policemen, of the Black community and law enforcement. And we also have a concern about equality, racial equity in the criminal justice system. And I don't see those issues being addressed very much on either side. Of course, we vote democratically primarily, African Americans do. But if you look at the presidential debates, 2 debates that have occurred so far, very little has been said about the Black community's relation to law enforcement, and very little has been said about the criminal justice system.
Well, it seems to me that very little has been said in terms of policy about many things.
Exactly.
With this election, but go on.
Yeah, how do you deal with issues of poverty, for an example? In areas like Detroit and Chicago, how do you deal with gun violence? Essentially nothing has been said about that policy-wise. So what we're dealing with here is an African American community that is struggling with how to cast their votes. I think most in the African American community will remain loyal to the Democratic Party, but we have to admit that very little has been said about these kinds of issues, about issues of affirmative action, about issues of voter suppression and intimidation. These are the kinds of issues that Black people hold dear. And unfortunately, we haven't seen much of this addressed in the debates between the presidential candidates. But I think African Americans will remain loyal to the Democratic Party.
And you know, Dr. Baldwin, sometimes it appears that we've simply forgotten what the suffrage has done for African Americans.
Exactly.
You know, and I'm just hoping that there will be a renewed attempt on the part of our leaders to further enhance what we're trying to do at the ballot box.
Exactly. If you look at the statistics now in the polls, I think we can say that 87% of African Americans will support the Democratic candidate. Of course, studies show since August of this year, 2016, that in some states 0% support the Republican candidate. And I've seen in other polls 1% to 8% for the Republican candidate. So what you see in these polls, of course, is the continuing loyalty of African Americans to a particular party system, the Democratic Party. But again, you know, the question remains, you know, to what extent have these party systems addressed the kinds of issues that African Americans hold dear?
And I think that it's true, as you indicated, that we've seen very little information in reference to what the Democratic Party can and will do in terms of policy. But on the other hand, the other folks have said absolutely anything about it.
Exactly.
And usually what they refer to as dog whistles and all those kinds of old ideas of taking us back a century, almost a century.
And that's the point you have to be careful about. How, to what extent will we turn back the clock? And I think you're quite right that the failure to address these issues means, of course, that what Black Americans feel and what they cherish have really gotten lost in this election cycle. You don't hear much discussed at all about what we think, or what we feel, or what we think about the future, or the kinds of issues that we hold dear, the kinds of values that we cherish. And so it's a very strange election cycle.
And I think it's summarized by the word, what have you got to lose?
Exactly.
And when you start summarizing everything and looking at a large percentage of the electorate from that perspective, it's really difficult to find out how, and I don't see how a party can survive with the kind of attitudes that many of them are taking toward not only Africans, but all minorities.
Latino Americans, Muslim Americans, gay and lesbian Americans. You have to be very careful. I think you have to be able to respond with policy initiatives that speak to the concerns of all of these segments of our society. And unfortunately, we haven't heard very much about that at all.
And of course, these debates that they're having really does not, in a real sense, produce any kind of information. It's a lot of showmanship and a lot of whatever. But really very little information in terms of what people will do. And
charges back and forth, attacks back and forth, and very little in terms of policy initiatives and policy solutions to the problems that we all face as Americans, and more particularly what African Americans face.
And we've been down for a long time in terms of the kind of aid and assistance that we need in terms of ability to do what we have to do.
Exactly. We're concerned very much about our future in this country. What about the future of affirmative action initiatives? What about the future of voting rights? What about the future of pay equity and employment opportunities? What about the imprisonment of African Americans and the astonishing rate of incarceration in this country?
You know, that's a curious thing. As many folks that are being killed in the streets by guns. Everybody's afraid to say anything about trying to
the gun culture and how it is contributing to a culture of violence in our country, and particularly in the Black community. We haven't heard much about that at all.
And of course, what we're doing is getting ready for the second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. people back to
It's all
work.
about personal attacks, you know.
And my God, hate. That's what it is. That's hate.
Hate.
Nothing but hate.
That's all it is, man.
I mean, you know.
And hopefully, I hope it doesn't discourage, and I'd like to deal with that in the last segment.
Okay.
To what extent this might discourage turnout?
I think it's going to promote turnout myself.
You do?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
My
I think that we're going to have the greatest, black folks going to get out and vote. I think, and I think all of the people who have felt disenfranchised
Gonna get out and vote.
Get out and vote.
Lord, and that benefits the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that will benefit the Democratic Party. I just don't see any place where folks are going to stay at home. I mean, this thing has gotten too hot.
Oh, yeah,
for folks. So you got to say something one way or the other. You know, that's what I told my son. I said, and my grandson, I said, now, y'all, you tell your folks y'all got to get out and vote. I don't care who you vote for.
But one other thing we need to deal with, I think, is to the extent to which the third party, the Libertarian Party, with Johnson, the extent to which he's ciphering off some black votes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But I think Miss Clinton's going to win this thing. I'm sure. That's what all of the folks that I hear on television, MSNBC, CNN,
Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post, they all show a victory.
And I'm just praying that. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Lewis Baldwin, and he's giving us some information in reference to African Americans and the election of 2016. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, let's during this last segment, let's take the opportunity to deal with some issues that you believe to be important in this election, so that we can sort of end this particular segment, given some directions in terms of what people can do and what we ought to do.
I think this election is important, first of all, because we need to assure the preservation of the Obama legacy. Obama has been very intentional about addressing health care issues, about addressing employment issues in the black community, criminal justice issue, the issues that pertain to law enforcement and its relationship to the black community. So we need to preserve his legacy in terms of pushing legislation that address the concerns for African Americans and women. We have to keep in mind that the Ledbetter Law or Act was signed by President Obama, which called for equal pay equity for women. So we first of all got to preserve his legacy for the black community, and I think that's very important for the black community. Another concern, of course, is how will this election cycle, and particularly the person who wins the office of president, how will that person address issues such as affirmative action, such as gun control, criminal justice, crime in black communities. I think that is very, very important. We look to the future, black Americans do. We've always looked to the future because we have had problems dealing with the past in many cases, and dealing with the present. We look to a future with hope.
Things have to get better.
Things have to get better, so we have a more hopeful view when it comes to the future. And I think black Americans today are looking for someone who will build on the Obama legacy. And I think most black American studies show that 87% of blacks at least will vote for the Democratic candidate. And I think that most black Americans feel that the Democratic candidate, who happens to be Hillary Clinton, represents a better prospects, a better choice for the future in terms of how our own platform in the black community will be advanced. Not only in terms of the preservation of the Obama legacy, but building on that legacy in terms of what? Creating more jobs. There's unemployment in certain black communities at 58%. So how will the future president address those kinds of issues? How will the future president address the gun issue? Hillary Clinton has talked about gun control. Donald Trump has talked about the Second Amendment rights and how to extend those rights. So I think, you know, we have to look at that because that's very, very important, because crime, particularly black on black crime, has reached epidemic proportions in places like Chicago and New Orleans and Philadelphia. So we have to be very concerned about the candidate who wins and how that candidate will promote our agenda as it relates not only to education and jobs
and the Supreme Court
and the Supreme Court, very important.
Yes, very important.
Pay equity, voting rights, affirmative action. I think these are the concerns that black people bring to the ballot as they vote for our president on November 8th.
And I think over the last 5 minutes, Dr. Baldwin, I think that this is an opportunity for black folks and other folks who feel that they've been discriminated against.
Disenfranchised.
That's right. It's an opportunity for them to move forward.
Exactly.
And the best way to move forward is to have a good agenda.
Exactly.
And I think that the Democrats do at least have somewhat of an agenda. I mean, at least it might be on the web page somewhere. Exactly. But at least it's out there somewhere, and it's not a bunch of well, anyway, I mean,
exactly.
I think it characterizes itself.
Exactly.
When you talk about the opposite of that.
Yeah, we have to keep in mind now that since the mid-'60s, when Martin Luther King Jr. was imprisoned at Reedville, it was actually 1961-62, blacks have shifted more toward the Democratic Party. And they've shifted more toward the Democratic Party because they perceive the Democratic Party as being more in line with the kinds of concerns that they have, particularly as they relate to civil rights, affirmative action, the right to vote, etc. So I think most black Americans will, in this election cycle, support the Democratic ticket to the tune of at least 87%. If you look at President Obama in 2008, he got 93% of the black vote. In 2012, he got 95%. I don't think that the Democratic candidate would reach that. But I think the Democratic candidate will at least receive 85 to 87% of the black vote.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very, very important statistic because it indicates that we can be very, very optimistic in terms. And I do believe, I know people have been somewhat pessimistic in reference to the participation of Africans in this particular election, but I feel a shutout coming on.
Exactly.
You know, and sometimes I wake up at night in cold sweat, thinking that perhaps I might have to start looking for a Canadian route somewhere.
Exactly.
No, but seriously, I think that it is a real problem in terms of how we perceive ourselves and the threats.
Yes, but so much is happening in terms of trying to discourage turnout. We see that I think on both sides to some extent, and particularly on the Republican side. This whole idea that the election will be rigged.
Yes.
And I personally don't subscribe to that thinking.
I don't think many people.
Yeah, I think we have in the United States, in this country, one of the most sophisticated systems of voting, electoral politics, and I think that there's a lot of integrity there. So I don't subscribe to the arguments of those who think that the election will be rigged. But I do think that people of all races, of all ethnic backgrounds, nationalities, religious backgrounds will go to the polls and will vote their conscience. So I expect a lot of integrity as it relates to the electoral process.
I don't expect anybody's going to be trying to cast 2 votes.
Exactly.
I often say that it's hard to get many of us to cast 1 vote.
Exactly.
I doubt very seriously you're going to get anybody to cast 2 votes. Go down there twice.
Yes, I think
I
think it would be an election characterized by integrity, and I think that I think that this process in America in our country has more integrity than in other parts of the world.
That's it. And if we don't have it, then how could we expect it to be anywhere else? Because
exactly.
And in spite of what everybody say, this is indeed the greatest country
yeah,
in the world.
Absolutely.
And I feel it a privilege personally to be an American.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen anything that we've done
yeah.
or whatever that would put me outside of being a citizen of the United States of America, in spite of all of the trials and tribulations that we've had in this country. I think that this is the best one for us.
There's one thing we can claim, of course, is that our struggle has been toward the realization of participatory democracy.
That's right.
And we've been on that course.
Yes, and I think we'll make it.
Exactly.
I think we'll be very successful.
Exactly.
And so, Dr. Baldwin, during the last 45 seconds, let me thank you for bringing by again some excellent information, some encouraging statements in terms of where we are and some of the possibilities. And while we stand on the very, very edge of this third debate, I do believe that this will be decisive in terms of helping us move toward the polls.
Yes,
and I look forward to that, and I know that I've talked to everybody in reference to it, and so a lot of folks are going to vote. I'm convinced of that.
That's the important thing. We have to have the turnout.
That's the turnout, regardless of
who we have to make sure that the realization of our vision for the future.
Okay, and let me thank you, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.